Hi everyone! So, as always, if you would just simply like to skip to the ranking, then you can skip to this timestamp down below. It will be in the description if I remember to put it there, but if not, again, you can skip to this timestamp. But I'd recommend you stick around for the intro because, of course, I always give, I think, not necessarily vital, but information that helps you understand how I go about my ranking and everything. Again, hi everyone. I'm so sorry I missed last week. It was quite a busy week, and the upcoming week that this video is coming out is also busy as well. So I'm trying my best to post videos, and this video low-key came about because on one of the days that I had a break, right, me and my friend watched practically all the Spider-Man movies, that being all of Tobey's movies, all of Andrew's, and one of Tom's. We didn't watch Far From Home or No Way Home because I don't have them, right? We watched the CDs, the movies that I have, and I do not have No Way Home or Far From Home. But after watching the movies, I thought it would be fun to go through and rank all of the villains throughout each Spider-Man's movies. That is exactly what I'm going to be doing today, and getting into the rules and parameters when it comes to what constituted a Spider-Man villain. I really wanted to focus on the main villains that antagonize Spider-Man throughout the movies. And I know this would be kind of obvious, like, as to who I'm choosing, but like, for example, in the first movie, Spider-Man Homecoming, there are two people that help the main villain of that movie. The main villain of that movie is Vulture, and he has two henchmen. And I didn't want to include the henchmen because they're not the main person antagonizing Spider-Man. They are basically helping the main person antagonizing Spider-Man. So I didn't include villains like that. Also, like, for example, there are villains that show up, like Scorpion, I believe, is hinted at in Homecoming or in The Amazing Spider-Man. Like, in the extra scenes, there are different villains that are also hinted at or show up as like small little features. So like, I didn't show villains like that because again, they weren't the main villains antagonizing Spider-Man, so they weren't included even though they are in the movie. That's kind of how I did my list. Also, spoiler, we have multiple Green Goblins showing up on this list. So if you hear me say Green Goblin more than once, that is because we actually have 3 of them, and I will be making distinctions based off of which one I'm talking about. And of course, I always use pictures, so it's going to be easy to follow along. And lastly, as always, this is going to be your spoiler warning. I'm not going to be necessarily recapping everything that goes on in these movies, but I am going to be talking about plot points that happen in all these movies to justify as to why I'm putting certain villains where on the list. So if it's been a while since you've seen the movies or you've never seen the movies, I'm going to be spoiling stuff from the movies. So again, this is your spoiler warning. Now let's get into the ranking. I basically put these villains in order of the movie that they show up in, so it honestly should be pretty easy to follow along. I just thought it'd be fun to do it that way. Like, this is the first one we see, this is the last one we see, type of thing. So the first villain I'm going to be talking about is Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, the original Green Goblin for the Tobey Maguire series, because of course there's been other renditions of Green Goblin, not only after him but before him as well. Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin in Tobey's movies, he is a different type of evil, but I feel like it is accentuated even more in No Way Home. Like, I just think of how easily he manipulated Tom Holland's Spider-Man, Tom Holland's Peter Parker, into believing that he was good, only to flip it on his head and kill his aunt. Of course, in the original movies, he was potent as well, but I just kind of feel like maybe in the original movies he was toned down a bit. Like, they only let him take it so far, even though he did cause a lot of destruction, and he was still like psychopathic. Like, I'm thinking of the scene in the first movie where Tobey's Spider-Man goes into a house to save people, and he's in the house and he hears a baby crying and he's looking for the baby, and it ends up being the Green Goblin, and this fight ensues between them. There's like moments like that. I feel like Green Goblin, out of all these villains, is willing to take it there. He's willing to take it to a level that other villains would think is too far. And again, I especially think that is accentuated in No Way Home. It's like, I don't know, like in the early 2000s, they had a limit as to how far they would let like people who are evil go. And then, you know, that era, they were like, oh yeah, no, you can absolutely show all the death and destruction that these people have caused. So as of right now, I'm gonna put him at a 2 because I feel like he is a very, very awful villain, and his villainy is, you can't discredit how villainous he is as a villain. But I'm also thinking about in terms of how much destruction he caused, not even when it comes to human life, but just in like general architecture as well. And when I'm thinking about that, I see other villains on here who have possibly done more destruction than he has done. Because if you think about it, yes, his destruction was aimed towards other people, but it seemed like a lot of it was directly aimed towards Tobey Maguire Spider-Man himself and Tom Holland Spider-Man himself as well. So again, I'm gonna put him at a 2. Next, we have Doc Ock. I really like Doc Ock as a villain, but not because he is the most awful villain. It's because I just like his character. He's the villain that you can reason with him. And I think that's what I've always found interesting about his character. Like, even in the original movies, it was almost like, yes, he was a villain, but he was willing to be better and willing to do better, especially because he was almost like a victim of his own science experiment, and he just let the science experiment rule him. And then eventually, like he did in the original movie, he came to his senses. And Peter isn't what caused his demise in the original Spider-Man 2. It was himself, because he still had a conscience at the end of the day. And again, in No Way Home, you know, once Peter fixed the inhibitor on the back of his neck, he was the one trying to help Peter round up and reason with these other villains that had, you know, come from other universes. So when it comes to villains, as of right now, I am going to put Doc Ock at, I would say, a 9, because he still does do quite awful things, don't get me wrong, but he is one of the only ones on here I feel like you could talk down when it comes to doing something villainous. So yeah, he's going at a 9. Next, we have Sandman. Now, I would say Spider-Man 3 is one of those movies that has confused me. Like, the first time I watched it, it confused me, and watching it again, I was less confused, but it still kind of confused me. Now I understand like how Sandman is as a villain, but there's still some things about him that I'm like iffy on. I understand in the movies, not going into anything that happens into the comics. I'm strictly talking about everything that happens in the movies. When it comes to Sandman, I understand he was kind of a criminal in the first place, right? But he was also doing criminal actions to help save his daughter. And in that regard, I honestly kind of feel he's kind of like Doc Ock, where you can reason with him. I just feel like he is not as easy to reason with him, because he seems like he has a bit more of a shorter fuse. But in the grand scheme of things, if you look at the destruction he caused in the original movie he was in, Spider-Man 3, and in No Way Home, he caused a lot of destruction, more than I would say Doc Ock, which is why I feel like he definitely should go above Doc Ock when it comes to villainy. So I'm going to put Sandman at an 8. Next up, we have Venom. When it comes to looking at Venom, especially since he really only, the Venom that I'm talking about really only showed up in Spider-Man 3. First, it's hard to peg Venom as a villain, because what he does and how he operates is strictly based on the host that he is inhabiting, right? Like, when he was inhabiting and helping Tobey's Spider-Man, Tobey wasn't out killing people. He was still being Spider-Man. It's just his better judgment was a bit impaired, versus when he was inhabiting someone like Eddie, he was allowed to be a bit more aggressive. So I know Venom as the alien species himself is a bit aggressive, but again, like I said, how aggressive he is based on the host. Like, he definitely does go after people who have that aggression. Like, that is said, is not necessarily said as being aggression, but people who have like a vendetta or a vengeance, who just like have that type of anger within him. That's who he tries to find as a host. And so I think what I'm trying to say, if I can put my words together, is I wouldn't consider Venom himself the villain, I would say he gives the true villains the power to be villains, right? Like if Eddie didn't have Venom, he wouldn't have been able to do all that he can do. And Venom was helping him, but it was really Eddie who was, pushing for everything to be done, because the reason that he gives for enjoying pairing up with Venom is because he was angry that Peter made him lose his job at the Daily Bugle. That was the main thing driving him to use Venom and take down Tobey's Spider-Man. When it comes to Venom as a villain, in the grand scheme of things and comparing him to other villains, his villainy is minuscule. So as of right now, I think I'm going to put him at a 10. Next, we have the new Green Goblin, which is James Franco version of Green Goblin in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. I will say, after rewatching the movies, James Franco's version of Green Goblin low-key pisses me off, because the reason he becomes Green Goblin is simply a lack of communication between his character, Henry, and Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker. Like, if Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker was like, hey, I didn't kill your dad, he was punctured by his own flyer that he used, and it wasn't me who killed him, the entire problem wouldn't have happened. And the thing is like, the reason that James Franco's, Green Goblin comes to his senses is because the butler tells him that exact thing. And I'm like, I sat there and I watched it and I was like, he couldn't have told him that earlier. He couldn't have saved James Franco the trouble and just told him earlier that it was shown that his father had died because of the puncture wounds of his own flyer and not Spider-Man. But anyways, because that was the driving force behind his Green Goblin, I would say that, like Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, a lot of the stuff that he does as a villain isn't directed towards anybody but Peter. And I mean messing with Peter's life and what Peter loves. And so when you think of that compared to other villains we have on this list who were doing what they were doing because they wanted to hurt everyone and not just hurt one person, it's like, yes, he's a villain, but if you're walking down the street, the Green Goblin would probably fly over you because you're not his target. The new Green Goblin, James Franco's Green Goblin, would probably fly over you because you're not the target. Peter Parker is. And I would say, compared to his father as Green Goblin, he wasn't as good of a Green Goblin. And you have to give him credit, because in the end, once his butler tells him that it wasn't Peter who killed his father, he does switch sides and ends up not only helping Peter to save, what is it? It's not, yeah, MJ, Mary Jane, MJ. Yeah, there's so many Mary Janes and Gwen Stacy's and just all in the universes. So if I mess up their names, I'm sorry. But he switches sides and decides to help Peter save Mary Jane, save MJ, and he also ends up giving his life to save Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man. So, I mean, if you look at that, when it comes to villains, it's like he still has a heart. So as of right now, I'm going to put him at a 7, because I practically put Sandman, Doc Ock, and Venom at the lowest points. So the lowest point that he can go at now is a 7. Next, we have Dr. Kurt Connor, and now we have moved into the Amazing Spider-Man. So I will be referencing Andrew Garfield, my favorite Spider-Man, by the way. So Dr. Kurt Connor, his villain name is the Lizard, so I will be referring to him as the Lizard and not Dr. Kurt Connor, because it's just a mouthful. So anyways, the Lizard as a villain, I feel like, in my opinion, scarier than villains like Venom or Sandman. It is because how he goes about being a villain isn't that he wants to hurt people himself, he wants to change people, right? Like, his entire mission throughout the movie was to, help himself, to make himself a better specimen who can't die, who can regenerate, who can grow and get stronger. And then he decides to give the rest of the world a gift and make it so that everyone else is like him, and becomes a lizard who can do everything that he can do. And some would call that biological warfare. It technically kind of is a form, or like I don't want to say the T word, but he didn't directly cause too much harm to anyone but Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. Like, all the tussles and fights he had, all the direct hand-to-hand combat he had happened with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, but that was never his intention. That was not what made him a villain, because he was never going out of his way to just hurt people. Like, if you remember in the first movie, Gwen is hiding in a closet with the device he wants to use to, release this gas into the air that changes everybody into lizards. And he simply opens the closet door and takes the device from her and doesn't cause any harm to her because he doesn't want to do that. It doesn't benefit him any way, shape, or form to have killed her in that moment. He is one of those villains that believes that what he is doing is for the greater good of people. And as an actor, I love villains like that because they're the type of villains who do not believe they're villains. So again, from an acting standpoint, they're fun to play because they're scary people if you like really think about it on a deeper level. But where would I put him on the list? When it comes to villains, I honestly say I'd put the lizard at a 3, and it is because, again, even though Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man was able to stop him from releasing the gas onto the entirety of New York, he was still able to change some people. And if you think about what would have happened if he had succeeded, it would have been awful. So yeah, I'm gonna put him at a 3 for now. I'm not completely sold on him being a 3, but that's where he's going for now. Next, we have one of my other favorite villains along with Doc Ock, and that is Electro. I don't know, there's something about Electro as a villain that I just love. I think I love Jamie Foxx's acting interpretation of Electro, but I also love the soundtrack that they use for his character. I love the effects, everything, all the visual SFX, like all of it. I just love all of it. But him as a villain, I think Electro is scary because he switches on a dime, not as drastically as Green Goblin, but he starts out as a man who just simply wants to be seen, right? And then once he becomes Electro and he's standing in the middle of Times Square, he at first just doesn't know who he is and is, kind of just trying to gather his bearings. And then once he accidentally causes destruction and Spider-Man has to save all the people he is going to electrocute because like that's what he's doing, that moment is when he becomes a awful villain because his goal, what drives him as a villain, is to be seen. And in that moment, he decides causing all the destruction that he proceeds to cause throughout just the rest of that one scene is going to guarantee him a spot in being in the news. And they don't ever show it, but I was just sitting there with my friend watching the movie, and as he's practically destroying the entirety of Times Square and people are running, I'm just sitting there thinking about practically all the death that probably happened in that scene if we're thinking about like the Spider-Man universe as like a real place. Like if you go and watch it and just think about all those big screens falling onto all those people as they are running, it's just like, yeah, that's and then if you think about later on in the movie when he gets recruited by Harry to take out Spider-Man, again, he causes even more destruction. And if you were in the Spider-Man universe and you had to escape a villain, when it comes to villains you can or can't escape, I honestly feel like he's a villain you can't escape because he's electricity, and us as humans, our hearts are like he's taking your heart out. It doesn't matter how far you are. Like he's just, you're out, you're gone. You're not outrunning that. So yeah, I think right now I'm just gonna put him at a 5 because I feel like he's the middle of the road when it comes to villains. Like no, I'm gonna put him at a 4. I feel like he is bad and the amount of destruction that he causes is awful, but what drives him as a villain is, for lack of a better term, like wishy-washy. But again, I'm not completely sold on that spot for him either. So going at a 4 for now. The next we have is Rhino. And I was a bit iffy on including Rhino, but he technically does apply to my rules and parameters because he does show up at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man. And he doesn't get like a full movie to shine. He does show up in the beginning of the movie. But again, I was a bit iffy of including him on this list because I feel like I don't see enough of him to really judge how awful he is as a villain. He seems like an awful criminal, and on top of that, the minimal destruction we see that he does cause at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a lot. But in the grand scheme of things, I feel like as a villain, he definitely does have the potential to be awful, but I just don't feel confident putting him at a high place on this list with how little I had seen of him in the movie. So as of right now, I think I'm just going to put him at a 6 because that's the lowest spot I can put him at. Next up, we have our last and final green Goblin, the Green Goblin that shows up in The Amazing Spider-Man. I do not know the name of the actor off the top of my head. I know he was in Valorian and I loved him in Valorian, so I will put his name right here. But out of the three Green Goblins on this list, I'd have to say it goes Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, his Green Goblin, and then James Franco's Green Goblin, because I feel like his Green Goblin has that same villainy and evilness that the original Green Goblin has. Honestly, I feel like he is a good mix of Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin and James Franco's Green Goblin. And the reason I say that is because I feel like his destruction and his drive and his craziness as Green Goblin is on par with Willem Dafoe's, but his vengeance, his targeting of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and his want and need to destroy everything in Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man's life is on par with James Franco's new Green Goblin that shows up in The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Like, he's just that perfect combination to be awful. And of course, we don't see that much of him as Green Goblin, but in the little that we do see of him, I feel like in Andrew Garfield's The Amazing Spider-Man, he causes the most damage to Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man on a personal level because he is the reason that Gwen Stacy dies. And to be honest, I also feel like what drives him as a villain is honestly selfish, because I think what gets me about his Green Goblin is the fact that you can tell at the heart of his character he is a rich kid who doesn't like being told no, because when Spider-Man shows up and tells him that he can't give him his blood, he turns on a dime, because on some level it kind of seems like he believes he is owed that, because the spider that bit Spider-Man came from the Oscorp facility and he owns Oscorp. But we also end up finding out in the movie that like the experiments, the spiders and all that only work because of Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker's blood and DNA, because that is how his dad, who was a scientist there, set it up. Anyways, when you look at him as a villain, as our last Green Goblin on this list, as of right now, I'm going to put him at a 1, because I don't necessarily at this moment in time feel like he is a 1, but I do not feel like he is lower than the 1, 2, or 3 area. Next up, we have the Vulture. And now we have moved on to Tom Holland's Spider-Man. So whenever I refer to Spider-Man, I'm talking about Tom Holland. To be honest, especially when looking at the other villains on this list, I wouldn't say Vulture is as bad as these other villains, because if you look at his intentions throughout the duration of Spider-Man Homecoming, he wants to just steal alien tech and create like weapons and stuff to sell to people, which I'm not saying is a good thing in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying if you look at Electro, who is destroying Times Square, or you look at Green Goblin, who is targeting Peter's entire life, one of the only reasons that Spider-Man, Tom Holland Spider-Man, even fights the Vulture is because he keeps getting in that man's business. Tom Holland Spider-Man keeps getting involved in Vulture's business. Vulture doesn't get involved in his business. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I'm thinking about the ferry boat scene where the ferry boat gets cut completely in half. The only reason that entire situation happened is because Tom Holland Spider-Man got involved. And again, I'm not saying what the Vulture did or what he was doing I agree with in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying most of the time throughout this movie, it is the Vulture being a bad guy, selling stuff and stealing stuff, and Spider-Man putting himself in the middle of those situations. So when we look at him as a villain, he's kind of on par with like villains you see in the Ocean's movies. Like, they're just stealing stuff and doing things and making money off of the stuff they steal, right? So yeah, it seems like right now I can only put him around a 5, so I think I'm going to put him at a 5. Our last villain we have on this list, because if you think about the last Tom Holland Spider-Man movie, No Way Home, it is literally other villains we've had on this list. So our last new villain introduced in the Spider-Man universe as of right now, because there is a new Spider-Man actively being filmed or in production, whatever, right now, but the newest one we have is Mysterio. And Mysterio as a villain villain is interesting to me because he's just a lot of mind games, honestly. Like, yes, he does cause a lot of destruction, but a lot of what he does is tricks, if that makes sense. Like, I'm thinking of the scene where he causes Peter to get hit by a train. Like, that was only able to happen because he was able to manipulate the world around Peter. And by the end of the movie, Peter is able to get in touch enough with his spidey senses to be able to defeat Mysterio. And again, I feel like what Mysterio wanted to do was also very on level, not the same exact level, but on level with what the Lizard wanted to do. And when I say that, I just simply mean that he wanted to cause harm to populations, right? But I'm trying to place, because obviously he is the reason that Tom Holland Spider-Man is revealed as Peter Parker. Like, Spider-Man is revealed as being Peter Parker because of him, and he was able to ruin Tom Holland's Spider-Man's life because of that. So he indirectly, because he dies in Far From Home, he indirectly causes the entirety of No Way Home, which I wouldn't necessarily put on him because it was also partly Peter's fault, but he's the one who like kind of starts that entire mechanism because he frames Peter for his death, even though that wasn't Peter's fault. So I don't know. When it comes, as of right now, I couldn't really only put him at an 11, but yeah, I can only put him at an 11. He's probably gonna go somewhere else when I revamp my list, but yeah, he's just going at an 11 for now. I realized I never mentioned it, and I don't even know if anyone noticed it. I do not have any Spider-Man merch. So I was like, what can I put my mic on? Because I try to put my mic on stuff that low-key matches what I'm talking about. And so I was like, do I have any villains in my room that I could put my mic on? And I did. On my bookshelf, I had, let me get closer to the camera. I had a little Sukuna action figure sitting on my bookshelf because Jujutsu Kaisen is my favorite anime. And so, yeah, if you're wondering why my mic is on Sukuna, it's because he's the only villain I have readily available in my room to attach my mic to. But anyways, now I'm going to read you my current list, and then I'm going to rework my list, and read you the updated list. So again, 1 being the most villainous of villain, and 11 being the least villainous of villain. But then again, all these villains are awful people. Keep that in mind. Let's get into it. So again, starting at number 1, we have the Amazing Spider-Man's Green Goblin, Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, the Lizard, Electro, the Vulture, Rhino, James Franco's New Green Goblin, Sandman, Doc Ock, Venom, and Mysterio. Now I'm going to again rework my list, and I will be back in literally 0.5 seconds. Okay, so I have reworked my list, and I was actually sitting here for a while because without spoiling it, I was kind of stuck on the 1, 2, 3 spot, and I'll go more into detail after I reveal my new list. But it just, again, I was a bit iffy on the 1, 2, 3 spot, like the order it should go in because of who was going where. But anyways, starting from 1 being the most villainous of villain to 11 being the lowest villainous of villain on my new list, we have the Amazing Spider-Man's Green Goblin, Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, the Lizard, Electro, Mysterio, the Vulture, Rhino, Sandman, James Franco's New Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and Venom. So what I was saying, I was just a bit iffy on if I should put the Lizard higher because it was just the fact that his entire thing was kind of like, again, for lack of a better term, biological warfare. And I think the thing that made me put him at the number 3 spot instead of possibly 1 or 2 is because he wasn't able to execute his plan, right? Like, I probably would have put the Amazing Spider-Man's Green Goblin or Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin at a lower spot if they weren't able to truly execute the things they set out to do. Like, the Amazing Spider-Man's Green Goblin was able to kill Gwen Stacy, and Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin was able to kill Peter's aunt. Like, they did what they set out to do, and Peter was not able to stop them. So I think that's why, along with all the other awful things that they do, is why I put them at the 1 and 2 spot over the Lizard being at the number 1 spot. But anyways, I would love to know where y'all would put all the Spider-Man villains, what order you would put them in, and why. If you want to tell me in the comments section, I would love to read it because I feel like, I just think it'd be fun to read what y'all have to say. But anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. Liked if you like it, subscribe if you want to see more of me. I post every Wednesday, or at least I try to. I did miss last week, so I do my best. I do the best I can. But I hope you have a good weekend, weekday, weeknight, and bye!